All right, we're rolling. Hey guys, it's Adam Reek with Stay MKE, and today I wanted to show you a couple of tools that we use behind the scenes to analyze a property to see if it makes sense as a short-term rental. So, a couple different ways we can look at this, and we're going to dive into Excel here. The first scenario is a lease scenario. So this would be a property where the property owner or the landlord is converting from a traditional long-term rental into a short-term rental model, and we want to analyze to see how much money do we need to generate in order for that unit to be profitable above and beyond, or be profitable at the same level or more than what that landlord's currently getting as a long-term rental. That's kind of the incentive to do this, right? So here's how we do that. I've got a couple of calculators built out here, and basically these two boxes go together, and then these two boxes down here to go together, and they're essentially mirror images of each other. So I'll show you how this works. So if we are going to assess a landlord's current rental unit, and we want to find out, how much do we need to generate on a nightly basis throughout the different seasons of the year in order for this to make sense. So what we do is we can put in the rent that landlord is currently getting, or what they're trying to get. I like to add a little 10% bump, because we want to be able to make more money doing short-term rental than what we're currently getting. And we've got to add in some money for some additional expenses that the landlord's going to be on the hook for, that typically a tenant would pay for otherwise, like the gas and electric and the internet. That's going to give us a subtotal there. We need to add in a management fee for ourselves, which is typically 20%. That's going to give us the gross revenue that the property needs to generate. So we need to get this much money in order to pay us, pay the additional expenses, and still end up with a little bit more, a 10% bump from what you're currently getting. Okay? So then from there, slide back over to this box. Here's the revenue number that we needed to generate. There's a bunch of stuff in here you don't really need to pay attention to. It gets pretty nerdy, but I have put in occupancy percentages throughout the various seasons that are expected, and based on that, it's going to tell us what our nightly rate needs to be in these different seasons, and then it's going to tell us our average nightly rate throughout the entire year and our average occupancy percentage throughout the entire year. So I can look at this, look at the property, look at the number that the landlord is hoping to get, and it's going to spit out these numbers for me, and I can make a judgment call on whether or not I think these numbers are realistic. If they're not realistic, then it doesn't make sense. If I feel confident we can hit these numbers and hit these numbers and still deliver that to the landlord, then we've got something worth talking about. So then this calculator up here is basically the opposite of that. We're going to start with our nightly rate. So we're going to put in, what do I think this property will do during the summer season on average, which is our peak rate. Put in the occupancy percentages. That's going to tell me the gross revenue that the property will do. We take out a management fee. We take out the additional expenses. We take out the little premium that we want to be able to give that landlord on top of their current income, and it's going to give me my target monthly rent. So in other words, if I see a property that I think I can do this with, and I can do this with, this calculator is telling me how much rent that landlord, or a target number for me, for current rent, for traditional long-term rental. If that property is currently asking $1,100, I'm in pretty good shape. If that property is asking more than that, I don't think I can make it work. So this calculator tells me the level of rent I can go after for this property. And this calculator is telling me the nightly rates I need to achieve based on the income that I need to deliver to the landlord. I hope that makes sense. But the point is, for property owners out there, landlords, if you know what you're getting, if you know what the market's going to bear as a long-term rental, the tricky thing for most people is this part. It's how many nights am I actually going to book, and what are those rates going to be? There's a little bit more that goes into that. There is a lot of data out there, but we can help you figure that out. We want to be realistic about it. We don't want to, come up with a bunch of pie in the sky projections that don't have a prayer of actually coming true. So that's how we analyze a property that we're considering leasing. Some people refer to that as the arbitrage model. Some people refer to that as the subleasing model. But that's what it looks like. All right, these calculators are set up to analyze a purchase. So these are calculators that I use when I'm analyzing a property to see if it would make sense for us to purchase. And this is also a great tool for my realtor friends out there. If you have a client who is thinking of purchasing something specifically for putting it on Airbnb and doing short-term rentals, these are some great tools. So again, they're basically mirror images of each other, but I'll show you quickly how these work. This one is basically going to tell me how much can I afford to pay for a property based on the income that I believe it's going to generate. So I'm going to put in the occupancy percentage, the average nightly rate. These are yearly numbers. That's going to give me the gross revenue for the property. I'm going to put in all of my expenses. I'm going to put in the amount of cash flow that I want to end up with at the end of the month. And it's going to crunch the numbers and give me a purchase price. So this is the most I could afford to pay if I'm putting a mortgage on the property. This is a 20% down, 4.5%, 30-year amortization. So this calculator basically tells me how much can I pay for this property that's going to do this. It's going to bring in this much revenue, and it's going to cost this much for expenses. I want to make sure that I'm getting what I want out of it. How much can I afford to pay? This calculator in the middle here, should touch on quickly. This is a highly scientific, technical metric that I came up with called the PETA factor. And it's basically, as you can see, how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, and how many times a month am I going to turn this thing over? The bigger it is, the more bedrooms, the more sets of sheets, the more bathrooms, the more times I'm turning it over, the more arduous it is to manage. So that's going to give me my cash flow number based on the PETA factor. So this calculator here is basically the reverse of this one over here. This one's going to tell me how much revenue do I need to generate based on a given purchase price. So if I see a property that's $140,000, I can plug that in. It's going to tell me how much I'm going to borrow based on a 20% down payment. If I put 20% down, I need to borrow this much. There's my monthly payment. There's the cash flow that I want in my pocket at the end of the month based on the PETA factor. Here's my monthly expenses. To pay all those numbers, we need to generate this much in revenue. I think I'm going to achieve 40% annual average occupancy. That tells me that I need to get an average nightly rate of $175. So kind of analyzing it forward and backwards. And I think it's, for me anyway, it's really helpful to do that because you kind of approach it from both sides and see if it makes sense. Based on these numbers, do I think I can find a property for that's going to do these numbers? And then vice versa, do I think a property that I pay that much for can do these numbers? So I hope that's helpful to at least give you an idea of kind of how we look at things behind the scenes. So whether you're a property owner, if you have a property that you're thinking about doing short-term rental with, but you're not sure if it would make sense, or if you're considering purchasing something specifically to do short-term rentals with, give me a call. We can run some numbers pretty quickly for you here and make some realistic projections and help you figure out if it makes sense or not. So I hope that helps. If you have any questions or you're interested in learning a little bit more about how to analyze a property for short-term rentals, give me a call. Let me know. I'll be happy to help.